You're listening to the Vint Wine Podcast, where you'll hear interviews and stories from around the wine world. From writers and critics to winemakers and sommeliers, we'll explore the people and businesses who are instrumental in shaping wine culture. Enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Vint Wine Podcast. I am your host, Billy Galenko, and we are here with a packed show for you today. We have a fascinating interview with Charlotte Reed, General Manager of Brand at New Zealand Winegrowers. We are bringing back giveaways, and we also have two very interesting wine news bits, something I learned and something fun fact that I really would like to share with everyone. So first, let's touch on the latest giveaways. I think everybody will remember that we had Corbin giveaways when they were sponsors of the podcast. Well, coming off of last week's very interesting episode with Emily Falconer, the team at Vineyard-driven was kind enough to give me two really fantastic coffee table books that I can now give away to our listeners. They are fascinating books. They are large coffee table sized books with beautiful photos and tons of information. One of the books is all about the 25th anniversary of Syrah, which was in 2019. It has beautiful photos of the vineyards, tasting notes, tasting photos from special tastings over the years. It has an awesome outline of the vineyard itself, a vineyard map. It has a foreword from James Suckling and just a ton of really interesting information. It's a gorgeous book, tons of amazing photos, a perfect addition for any wine lover's coffee table or even just bookshelf. And then the second book is marking the 20th anniversary of the Berlin tasting. If anybody remembers when we interviewed Eduardo Chadwick, and we also touched on it with Emily, it basically goes back to the tasting that put Vigneto Chadwick on the map, along with really putting Chilean wines further on the map. This book is absolutely amazing. That tasting, if you will remember, was done in conjunction with Stephen Spurrier, who helped put on the Judgment of Paris tasting. This book actually has a foreword from Stephen Spurrier, along with a number of MWs and some other folks. It is a fantastic book. It has a ton of interesting information and, again, really gorgeous photos. So you may be asking, how do you enter the giveaway for these two books? Well, we're going to be doing two different approaches this time. So one, the first way you can enter to get one of these books shipped to your door will be to leave a review for the podcast, either on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Screenshot that review that you left. It can just be stars. Just leave, hopefully, 5 stars. Take a screenshot of that and email it to me at billy@winepod.com. That email is winepod.com. Or you can go to the Facebook group, Wine Enthusiasts and Collectors, ampersand between the enthusiasts and the collectors. And like the post, I will be posting photos of these books. So like that post and join the group. And if you do both of those things, you will also be entered. And I will select 2 people, one who emailed me and one who posted on the group. Also, if you have been kind enough to already leave a 5-star review or any review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify, just take a photo of that, screenshot of that already. You don't need to leave another one unless you really want to. So that is the giveaway. Really exciting stuff. These are absolutely gorgeous coffee table books. So everybody should have them, and I'll have the photos on the Wine Enthusiasts and Collectors Facebook page. But for now, we will move on to the news for today. It's just a couple tidbits. The first one is something I actually just learned about last week, and that's why I included it in the Vint Wine Marketplace news. It is that Opus One earned the prestigious butterfly mark. I read this. I was like, what is the butterfly mark? I had never heard of this before. It turns out it is a sustainability certification. There are tons of these days. I feel like they're coming out of the woodwork. And it is created by a company called Positive Luxury. And they say that the butterfly mark is designed to hold top-end companies to higher standards so that they can lead from the front. Another quote is, "We believe luxury should lead and have the highest standards for sustainability." And that is very interesting. I just wanted to share this with everyone. I had never heard of the butterfly mark. It's like a blue butterfly. So apparently if you see this on any of your luxury merchandise, I think, as well, and along with wine, but if you see this on any wine, it's just another another validation of the sustainable practices, both in regard to farming, but as well as social and material risks as well in the luxury industry. It's meant to cover everything, not just the environment, which of course it covers as well. That was just something I learned last week and wanted to share with everyone. The second one is something that I just always find interesting, and I don't think it's talked about enough, is an article in Food and Wine. This is on heritage champagne grape varieties and how Champagne Drapier how Champagne Drapier and Champagne La Haute Frère are bringing them back in some of their cuvées. I think it's interesting that wineries are starting to tap into some of these older varieties, but I just really wanted to bring awareness around the fact that there are additional varieties allowed to be made into champagne. I first learned this in one of those ways where somebody said there were 7 grapes allowed in champagne. And I was like, no, you're wrong. There's only 3. And of course, I had egg on my face. I was the one who was wrong. So in addition to the 3 that, many wine lovers know, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Meunier, there's also Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris, Petit Meslier, and Arbonne that are also allowed in the blends. Interestingly enough, in the Champagne region, since these wines or these varieties were historically used, they also have historical names that they go by regionally as well in the area. Pinot Blanc is sometimes called Blanc Vrai, and Pinot Gris is also called Fromenteau. So that is an interesting fact that everybody can share next time they're drinking champagne. Everybody should drop that with their wine expert friends and see if everybody knows that there's actually 7 grapes allowed to be made into champagne. But if you want to learn more about what each of those varieties brings and their character, click the link in the show notes and you can learn more from this interesting article and maybe seek out some of those cuvées. And now on to the guests for today. We have Charlotte Reed, who is the general manager of brand at the New Zealand Winegrowers. They were actually kind enough to send me over a couple bottles to try ahead of this episode going live. And then we cover in the episode a lot of the topics in the wines that they actually shared. So first, they shared the Reserve Collection Tepa Hillside Sauvignon Blanc, which was a really interesting Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. It has all the characteristics you know and love in New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, very pronounced tropical fruit and grassy notes, and just that lovely guava, pineapple, everything that you expect in the nose. But it also has an extra layer of depth and minerality and a little bit more complexity because it is that reserve edition and it's from that single hillside bottling. So it's not just their general bottling, which they also released. So that was a really interesting Sauvignon Blanc, and it's just something that we want everybody to keep thinking about. New Zealand has what everybody knows, and there is a lot of widely produced in large volume Sauvignon Blanc coming out of the area, but there's also additionally site-specific, very complex and nuanced Sauvignon Blanc also coming out of the area that harkens maybe more to something that you might find in, say, the Loire Valley going down to Sancerre or Puy-Fumé. They're working on learning more and making more and more complex site-specific wines as well. So I encourage everybody to go out and check those out. And then they were also kind enough to send me a Love Block 2021 Central Otago Pinot Noir, which was really cool. It's from a producer that has regenerative farming practices, really respects the land, and you could really see the purity of the fruit in the wine come through. It had everything that I love in what makes New Zealand Pinot Noir one of my favorites. It has this like electric purity of the fruit, but it also has some of that, forest floor complexity, tertiary notes that you get from like Burgundian Pinot Noir, for example. So it's just something that this combination of purity of fruit, but also bright acid, but also this complexity from the tertiary notes that I really only find in New Zealand. It was a fantastic wine. I really appreciated tasting both of those. I highly encourage everybody to seek out both some of these more single vineyard, more complex reserve Sauvignon Blancs, as well as basically any Pinot Noir you can get your hands on. Not anyone, but the quality of wines coming out of New Zealand and making its way to the United States is really high at this point. And it's really interesting now to be able to taste region to region, not just Central Otago or North Canterbury. There's a ton of regions all producing unique styles, and we talk about that in the interview with Charlotte. This interview covers the whole breadth and depth of New Zealand wines right now. We talk about obviously the key producers or the key varieties that everybody knows, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Noir. We get into a few of the other varieties that are making their way, becoming more prominent on the global scene, including Chardonnay. We also talk about Riesling and Pinot Gris. And we just talk about how the perception of New Zealand wines has changed over the years and the different markets where they're sold. Charlotte started her career in the UK, which is interesting to hear about, but then she also spent a lot of time in Asia. And then obviously the United States is a big market for New Zealand wines now. So it's really interesting just to hear about how a wine region that really just, it's been around, they've been producing wine there for decades and decades and decades, but it really was becoming more of a commercial entity really just in the 80s was the early days. 80s, 90s really started taking off a little bit more seriously. So a really young wine region, and I'm talking the 1980s, in terms of being a global player on the global stage. And I'm a huge fan of a lot of New Zealand wines and was really happy to tell the story. And we will be working to have more New Zealand producers on the podcast. I actually just recorded an interview today, so we will certainly have one in the near future that I'm really excited about. And for now, I don't think I can talk about New Zealand wines as well as Charlotte can. So I will just go ahead and get to the interview. Without further ado, here is Charlotte Reed, General Manager of Brand at New Zealand Winegrowers. Hi, Charlotte. Thanks so much for joining today.
Great to be here.
Yeah, this is our first kind of foray into New Zealand on the podcast. We're going to have you kind of give an overview, and we're hoping to have some producers on in the future. So I'm really excited to dive in the whole world of New Zealand wines. But first, can we maybe get a little background on you and how you got into the wine world and what you do with the wines of New Zealand?
My father was a grape grower in the 1970s. So I was brought up on a vineyard, biking around, eating grapes at will, having sugar overload. And it was a pretty idyllic upbringing compared to the city upbringing I give my children today. But back then, the New Zealand wine industry in the 70s, it was rapidly growing. There was a very different industry structure. My father was a grower for larger wineries. There weren't as many small wineries as there are today in New Zealand. And I guess moving into my university, studying food science, where enology, fermentation was all part of the science, it just felt like a great fit for me. And I always knew, your lecturers always say, you're going to succeed in life if you're passionate what you do every day. And it feels like a great jigsaw puzzle fit for me. And I've just loved it. And I've been in the wine industry now for well over 25 years. After a while, you stop counting years, but just love it. And the challenges have always been there, and New Zealand's always had dynamic growth. So being part of something that's growing is exciting, and no day is ever the same.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's so interesting. Your dad, you grew up on a vineyard that long ago. I think a lot of people in their minds, like the real New Zealand wine industry started like 80s or really took off in the 90s. So it's good to remind people that there was certainly an industry going on before it was really widely exported around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. The New Zealand wine industry history, it's fascinating. It wasn't that long ago that we celebrated 200 years of the planting of the first vine in New Zealand, but that was largely for home consumption. And it wasn't really until the 70s, 80s when it really took off. From the mid-80s, that's when exports started, and the UK became our largest export market at that time. And later, the US has now become our number one. But it has been so much change. What my father had in the ground back then, they were experimenting due to New Zealand's cool climate. The experts were saying that cool climate varietals were what we would have to do for German hybrids. So my father had Riesling Sylvaner planted, which is Muller Thurgau, another name for Muller Thurgau. Chenin Blanc was widely planted as well. But today, Chenin Blanc is making a comeback and is made as a very premium white variety here now.
Interesting. So you've actually been a face for New Zealand wine even before your current role. You were representing wine in different markets around the world. What were some of those markets that you were in, and how was New Zealand wine perceived at that time, and how has it changed since then?
Yes, well, I've been working in wine since 2003 now in the UK. the wine shop window of the world. New Zealand wine there was very positively received back then. I was at Cambridge University for a while, and I remember it being in all the cellars of the key colleges back then. And I remember a chap describing it as angels dancing on your tongue. And I thought that's pretty amazing that someone from Britain is taken with this wine style. But back and then things like Cloudy Bay, they were still very much on allocation. There was a real growing fervour for it. The Sauvignon Blanc hit the UK market when I was living there, and it took it by storm. The winery that I was working for at the time sent their first exports to the UK in 1986, and there were wine commentators like Oz Clarke and many others that were just so captivated with this expressive style. The wine world had never seen anything like it. There's been lots of great storytelling about our Sauvignon Blanc with Marlborough, our region that does it so well, celebrating 50 years of being a key wine region.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe how or why it's endured for so long, and a little bit more about the range of styles? I think everybody thinks of Sauvignon Blanc as, well, maybe one thing. Maybe some people think of it as more premium, or some people think of it as cheap and cheerful. How do you think the full range and spectrum of these wines has led to its ongoing success and popularity?
That it was just a magical accident that Marlborough was discovered as a region that was so well suited to Sauvignon Blanc, being at the top of our South Island with cool ocean currents and snow-capped mountains not so far away. And you get this real vibrant freshness and this acidity and this exuberance that just jumps out of the glass. So magical Marlborough is very much a term, but Sauvignon Blanc grows well throughout our country. You know, we span 36 to 46 degrees latitude south. We're pretty southerly, but it is the cornerstone of our wine industry now. We're so proud of it, but we certainly want to keep advancing understanding of that great variety. There are many styles evolving now, whether it be sub-regional styles of Marlborough. There's not just one place of Marlborough. There are different valleys, whether it be the Wairau Valley, the Awatere Valley, the Waihopai Valley. There is a really neat interactive map that Appellation Marlborough Wine have just launched recently that talks in much more detail about the nuances of the Marlborough region. Yeah, that distinctive flavour profile, I think, is what has made it so famous. But you're now seeing, winemakers have got such skill, and our vineyards now have got a lot of depth that we had the understanding to make longer aged styles. I actually had a reserve 2009 Sauvignon Blanc from a winery I worked for back in the day just last week, and gosh, it was amazing. So for anyone who says that Sauvignon Blanc is for early drinking and can't be aged, I, from that experience, would beg to differ. Had it evolved into something different to what it started its life as, but it was still just so textured and food worthy. It was a really lovely experience. I think also techniques such as barrel aging or making wines in amphora, all these are elements in Sauvignon making now which are really interesting to observe, and lower yielding wines really pitching into that top end of the price range. Chardonnay is a varietal in New Zealand that has done really well in price brackets above 20, 30, 50. Our Sauvignon Blanc sweet spot has, in the United States, tended to be in that $10 to $15 range. But there is such upside for us to occupy the more premium positions. And we're really excited when we observe in the UK, which was our first export market, that once upon a time, Chardonnay was the dominant white variety. Now, Sauvignon Blanc outsells Chardonnay 2-1 in the UK. Why can that trend not be repeated in the US if we tell the right story? So we see exciting road ahead for New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, and we're looking forward to bringing that story to other export markets, that there's not just one style, there's many, many styles. And we think that freshness of our Sauvignon Blanc will be a story that people want to hear as they're looking increasingly for wines of refreshment.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. If you go back all of wine history, the most famous wine regions in the world took hundreds of years. Like Bordeaux took hundreds of years to go beyond just being known for as claret, and then they broke down the regions. I think it's only a matter of time as we learn more about the terroir and also the winemaking techniques that work best to age the wine, that it's like natural that it will continue to evolve and become more and more defined and like have different price tiers. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. I would say that also New Zealand wine produces the most refreshing wines in the world. And that's not just white wine, that extends into reds as well with this tingling acidity. We've just had our Pinot Noir conference here in New Zealand. There's been growing appeal for more than Sauvignon Blanc, our Chardonnays, Rieslings, and we've got over 50 grape varieties planted in New Zealand, but it's particularly the white wines. Over 80% of everything we export is white, but we're becoming increasingly well regarded for our reds as well.
Yeah. So you spent some time in the UK, and then you also spent some time in Asia. Was that a slower uptake since that market started with red wines and is now just really exploring white wines in force?
Yes. Yeah, it's been really such a privilege to be able to represent New Zealand wine in different parts of the world, going from the very established wine market of the UK, where I looked after many markets across Europe also, to then looking after the Asia region, which was at a much earlier stage of its wine appreciation journey. And yes, as you say, red wine for many reasons, symbolic reasons. Red is a lucky colour in China, for example. Health reasons, there was this perception, perhaps the French wine paradox supported that red wine has more health-giving properties. In a hot place like Asia, the refreshing wines, our white wines particularly, just go so much better with the climate. And I was based in China for 6-7 years, and it was slowly taking hold. And now we are just so delighted to observe that New Zealand is one of the fastest growing imported wines into the China market. I guess driven through digital communications. There's, digitally innovative in China with their various platforms. Top was born in China. Communication of benefits and being seen to do something and being part of something. Ourselves and Germany are doing very well in China right now. But that trend across the Asia region is taking hold with younger consumers, probably maybe not wanting to do something their parents were doing, I'm not sure. But yeah, it goes so well with the Asian cuisine as well.
Yeah, very cool. So for your role at the New Zealand Winegrowers, you're promoting New Zealand as a whole brand, but yet there are different, obviously under that umbrella, there's a ton of different wineries and growers, hundreds of them. How do you go about telling each of their stories uniquely and the story of each place while also keeping it under a cohesive line?
Yeah, so New Zealand Winegrowers is the only unified national wine organisation in the world that represents both growers and wineries. And we do 4 things. We have a research arm of our organisation. We have sustainability program that is run by New Zealand Winegrowers called Sustainable Wine Growing New Zealand. We have an advocacy team with in-house lawyers who help us with legal matters, labelling, regulations and the like, importation matters. And then I look after the brand team. And we used to be called the marketing team back in the day, but we had an intentional name change to brand to make it very clear that we are not here to do marketing for individual wineries. We're here to protect and enhance the overarching New Zealand premium wine brand. And so we put a lot of work back in 2023. We launched our new brand platform, New Zealand Wine, altogether unique. And that was an exercise where members were involved in the process, and we were aiming to just distill down what makes New Zealand wine, what sets us apart from our rivals. There are many countries producing refreshing wines, gorgeous white wines, but what is it about New Zealand wine that sets us apart from, say, South Africa or Chile or Australia, for example? So altogether unique was where we arrived at, which has 3 pillars, and those 3 pillars are tied into our logo, which has a uniquely New Zealand look and feel, and also resembles a bunch of grapes. And those three pillars are purity, innovation, and care. And that underpins everyone in our industry. So our members can use that brand to then build upon to tell their own brand stories. When we say purity, what does that mean? That word purity is no one else in the world has the purity of place that we have. We're down in the South Pacific. We have this unique environment where we're not far from Antarctica. We have cool ocean currents. We have warm days, cool nights. Our vineyards aren't very far from the sea. We have this maritime climate, this intense UV light from our very clear sky. So that's the pure environment. And then the care element is looking after our land for future generations through our environmental practices. And then the innovation is continually listening to our consumers for cues on what they want next. And so all that together is what we can build upon. And so altogether unique turns up when we're at, say, ProVine, the big wine fair in Dusseldorf, or we might run a masterclass in New York, and we will be there with our altogether unique branding, but we will be using exemplars of our industry to tell the story, whether it be a story of region or a story of diversity of grape variety or the like. And then our individual brands, well, they do their own talking. So we're that base platform for I always describe it to our members, it's Lego building blocks, that we're the base block, and then the regions can build their regional story on top of the New Zealand story, and then the individual winery can add their story on top of that.
That makes a lot of sense. So when you're talking about, I guess at that base level, the varieties and those stories are still there as well. How have you worked to slowly move away from just being known solely, and not that you're solely known for Sauvignon Blanc, but I think a lot of people know New Zealand wines for Sauvignon Blanc, towards broadening the varieties that maybe the region's known for, especially Pinot Noir? We can talk a little bit about the conference you had, and then also, I guess, is how the growth of Pinot Noir has gone a model for potential varieties to market those moving forward as well.
Well, as I said earlier, with New Zealand being so synonymous with refreshing grape varieties, with our strength in white wine, it's a very natural conversation to have with a wine lover or wine retailer, wine journalist, to say, well, if you like our Sauvignon Blanc, you'll love these as well. Our fastest growing varieties after Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Gris and Chardonnay. The wonderful thing with New Zealand being a long, skinny country is that we can show so much regional diversity. So there's no chance of getting bored with New Zealand wine. There's always different regions to explore and different styles. Yeah, white wine, we absolutely have a strength. But as you mentioned, Pinot Noir, that's our number one red planted variety. That's our talking point for red wine. So when we have our major event strategy, we alternate between having a Pinot Noir conference every 4 years and a Sauvignon Blanc conference. And they also form a platform for, whilst you're in New Zealand, please also discover our other great varieties as well. Yeah, so I'd say, coming back to the why, our wines just have this very distinctive freshness. And as global trends are for more refreshing wines, New Zealand really seems to be resonating. And I think that's a reason why New Zealand wine is seeing strong growth still in a very challenging market out there.
Very cool. So for the Pinot Noir conference that you had, I guess Pinot Noir is, I love New Zealand Pinot Noirs, and it's been interesting as I've been in wine studies over the years. It's become more and more of a focus for folks. And this year in my MW studies, I taste with people going for their advanced sommelier exam. And in multiple flights, New Zealand wines have either been mistaken for high quality Burgundy or just highlighted as the top wine of the flight in their own sense. So I feel like it's really getting prominence. How was maybe this year's conference different than the 4 years ago conference? I feel like the conversation in just that time has changed a fair bit around Pinot Noir.
Yeah, well, we had to be really patient. We had to wait for 8 years to hold our cycle of Pinot Noir conferences again. As with many in the world, that COVID pandemic really disrupted things. So our last conference for Pinot Noir was in 2017. So we were, as a committee, I was part of the committee with a group of really passionate producers, and our chair, Michael Henley, MW, did a great job on leading a conference with topics that were really relevant to today, because a lot had changed. And going back to our conference and what makes it special. When you come down to New Zealand, we want people to have after all that way, to have just an unforgettable experience and to come away feeling the real New Zealand, because we invite key journalists from our major export markets to this event, and we're so aware that they visit many wine producing countries. So what is it that's different about ours? And I think the way that we crafted the program this year, just building on past years of thought, we're so proud of our special place. I've mentioned before when talking about our branding, that's what's unique to us. No one can take that away from us. And when you look at it through an Indigenous to our Māori lens, a sense of place, the place to stand, it's a word called Turinga Waiwai. And that was introduced in our last conference back in 2017. And this conference aimed to build upon that. So it was a 3-day program, with the first day being focusing on a topic called whanaungatanga, which is quite a long word, I appreciate. But that's all about connectedness and about our people. The word whānau in Māori means family, but it's just a wider connected family. I'd say Pinot Noir files, whether they be winemakers or drinkers, they do connect globally. The Pinot Noir winemaker will travel around the world to perfect their craft, making the wine in different regions. And likewise at our conference, I had sitting next to me at a dinner people from Oregon who had gone to IPNC, loved it, and wanted to continue their journey of education to our New Zealand conference. And then our second day had this word kaitiakitanga, which sounds also a bit of a mouthful, but a kaitiaki is a guardian, and that's all about looking after our land for future generations. And this topic of sustainability and just doing the right thing by the land and by our people, it's really striking a chord right now. So those 2 days, the first 2 days, were just so meaningful, and I could see the international guests, and you can read the articles that have come out afterwards. Shana Clark has just written a wonderful article following her visit. It was just so gratifying that the story we endeavoured to tell just really came across well. And then the third and final day was a more looking to the future. We see such a strong future for New Zealand Pinot Noir, and that we have the sophisticated elegance that you would expect in a Burgundy, but we have this wonderful pure-fruited vibrancy that makes us uniquely New Zealand. So it's those two things together that are showing such fine examples from our country. And New Zealand Pinot Noir, it's of all of our varieties. When I've been out there in the trade selling it, I say it's the one variety that really does show regional typicity. Our country is 2,000 kilometres in length, and you can really taste the difference between a Central Otago Pinot Noir or one from North Canterbury, from Marlborough, from the Wairarapa, even Pinot Noir produced in Hawke's Bay. Yeah, there was a lot to talk about. We could have been there for longer than 3 days, but we felt very, very privileged that people spent that much time with us there.
Yeah, I think, for me, it obviously does vary region by region, but there's always an electricity in the New Zealand Pinot Noirs that you don't necessarily find anywhere else, which is always really cool. But yeah, I was asking about the conference in particular too. I think just having it starts that conversation, because I remember we had Eric Asimov on the podcast last year, and we were talking to him about what he was looking forward to in the year. And he was like, I'm going to New Zealand just for the first time because of this conference. And I feel somebody who's been so ingrained in the wine industry for that long, just giving them a reason to go down, I think is just an interesting way. And I think it works really well for having the purpose of the conference.
We were so delighted that Eric accepted our invitation. He's had many from the New Zealand wine industry over time, but we appreciate that many wine producing nations around the world have probably been knocking on his door. So yeah, we were delighted that 2025 was the opportunity that he took to come and spend some time with us. And he took the opportunity, as many others did after the conference, to get in the car and drive to our other wine regions. So he was lucky to also go down to Central Otago and join another wine event down there and share his insights, which was so valued by the community down in Central Otago.
Very nice, very nice. So I just wanted to ask a little bit more. So we've talked a little bit about Chardonnay and Pinot Gris coming into their own as well. I want to talk a little bit about Syrah and if there are any other red varieties that are starting to maybe gain a little bit more traction or just specialties of certain regions.
Yeah, absolutely. So Syrah, or Shiraz, as our next door neighbours call it, it's been doing really well. I just did look at the UK, where many of our members enter wine competitions, and 8 out of the past 10 years, New Zealand has dominated with trophies for Syrah. And Hawke's Bay, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, has a very special zone called the Gimlet Gravels. It's a unique piece of land denoted by soil type that gets warmer than the surrounding regions and is wonderful for ripening grape varieties such as Syrah and Cabernet Sauvignon and more, famous for its red varieties. And the Gimlet Gravels Winegrowers Association for many years now put together their annual vintage collection box, which they then send out to key influencers around the world, and then that gets picked up. And I think that their investment in that, it's relationship building. We're a long way away, but to be able to be a journalist sitting in the north of England or upstate New York and receiving this box of wines shows that people really want to get their message out. So Hawke's Bay is doing very well at Syrah, but there are other regions as well. Waiheke Island, just 40-minute ferry ride from Auckland, is a unique microclimate as well and produces great examples of it. And then New Zealand continues to surprise. North Canterbury, not far from Christchurch, there are ski fields down there, not too far away from those vineyards, and they produce Syrah. So it is actually a grape variety that isn't just relegated to the comparatively warmer regions of New Zealand. It's thriving in the cooler regions as well. And yes, we call it Syrah. Has the nod to the old world style of the Northern Rhone, lovely dry herb characters within there. But again, like our Pinot, it has that gorgeous vibrancy of fruit that runs through it as well.
Oh, very nice. Well, so through all of the varieties, all the vineyards, I think New Zealand is always pointed to as a kind of one of these beacons for sustainability efforts. Can you talk a little bit, just high level? I know it's not your realm of expertise, but I think, what is it, like 98% or something is certified sustainable? And then I'd like to ask a little bit more about what's the next step? How do you push that over towards maybe organic or regenerative as well?
Yes. Well, we are celebrating 30 years this year of sustainable wine growing New Zealand. We're really proud that as a wine producing country, we recognised very early on that to ensure our seat at the table, to not be a barrier to purchase, we knew that this was going to be increasingly important to our customers around the world, whether they be a retailer or a restaurateur, but ultimately the end consumer. Efforts have been made from 1995 on we call SWNZ, Sustainable Wine Growing New Zealand. So if you pick up a bottle of New Zealand wine, many of those bottles will have our logo on it. And we recognise that it's very important for consumers to, especially post-COVID, to make choices that are good for the planet. So I would say in more recent years, there is increasing awareness of the importance of sustainability. So our sustainability program adheres to the 6 UN sustainability pillars, and that is independently audited, our sustainability program, and it is always aiming to evolve. And it's our lens that we look at sustainability through, but there are other approaches that our members could take. You can be organically certified, you could be SWNZ certified, but still do things maybe more in the regenerative space. Soil, for example, is one of the UN goals for soil management, and that's the particular focus area for regenerative viticulture. So we see ourselves as, for our SWNZ program, as taking the best out of some of these other programs and incorporating them into ours. But it's ongoing. We are always listening and bringing international best practice to help continue to evolve our program. Water management here in New Zealand, freshwater farm regulations are coming here into New Zealand. So on the water pillar of our SWNZ program, that's another area that our SWNZ program is really keeping ahead. And we're looking forward to that continuing to evolve.
Yeah, are you seeing, I know New Zealand also has been, just like your neighbor Australia, on the forefront of different wine technologies, whether it be moving more towards screw cap earlier on. Are you seeing innovation in the vineyards as well, in terms of taking a cutting edge approach to maybe doing some of these old school things?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just at our Grape Days conferences in the regions in recent weeks, and our Brigado Research Institute, the wholly owned research arm of New Zealand Winegrowers, is leading some incredible research studies that will help us minimise for pest control, etc., applications to the vineyard, because we're just going to be having more resilient, adaptable vines, for example. But yes, there's many, many examples of sustainable approaches in the vineyards, and that's why we, as an industry organisation, we take it as our role to help share this information across our membership. So that's why we have the likes of Grape Days to share best practice and to gather groups of growers together so that they can learn from each other and incorporate that into their businesses.
Yeah, I think one of the examples that I have for my MW studies was a New Zealand producer who was using a certain canopy management technique to produce wines of lower alcohol with still full flavor and without having to de-alkalize. And I thought that was really interesting, and it got me thinking more on just general trends that maybe producers are adapting to. So in New Zealand, are you seeing more producers leaning into this low or no alcohol movement as well? Are you seeing demand for it? Or
Absolutely. Well, I think that case study that you mentioned, Dr. John Forrest was very generous with his hard work he'd done in the vineyard, where when you leaf pluck back to leaf A, you reduce the photosynthetic ability of the plant, but still have physiological ripeness in the grape. Yeah, really, really smart thinking. And that IP was given to a research project that New Zealand Winegrowers co-funded with industry. I think back then it was called the Lifestyle Wine Project, because we recognised it was a 7-year project that lifestyles are changing. And that project, with the various wineries that participated in, has laid a foundation for New Zealand's real leadership position in this low-no space. It helped frame that the world is changing, and yes, you can lower alcohols naturally in the vineyard, and that's one style of wine that consumers may want, but it also got us thinking about consumer behaviour and listening to the consumer, and actually some consumers wanted no alcohol at all. So Gießen was a grantor in that project, and whilst they learned about reducing alcohols, actually they're having incredible success with their 0% wines. So if it hadn't been for the thinking that we can do things differently in the vineyard, that would lead to that research project, that would lead to really understanding the consumer, perhaps the innovation to going to 0% never would have happened. It's a moving space. It's growing very, very fast globally, and we are really proud as a country that we in that lead pack of those who are growing fast, with some fabulous examples.
Yeah, it's also it's interesting. I guess you guys, the Sauvignon Blanc or any Sauvignon kind of based variety requires enough ripening so that those pyrazines aren't too green. But also, you don't want to ripen too much and make alcohol. So I thought that was really interesting that he was able to strike the balance between flavor and alcohol without getting too ripe. So that was cool.
No, there's many examples. I encourage you for your studies to learn more. We've still got our lighter wines website on the New Zealand Winegrowers pages, so I can direct you to that.
Sounds great. So looking forward for New Zealand wine, I think this is a big, like the no and low movement is a big pillar, obviously. Maybe getting some of these other varieties on board. What else are you guys looking at? Are you really targeting, are there certain markets that are of priority? I know you said the US is now a top market, but yeah, is there anything else that you're looking forward to in the near future?
Yeah, we've been pretty excited to observe that a lot of the growth in New Zealand wine of late hasn't come from our established markets of UK, US, and Australia. We're seeing really strong growth, as I mentioned earlier, in China, but across the Asian region. South Korea and Japan have been growing really strongly. We're seeing uplifts in Vietnam, Thailand, with their tax regime being lifted. New Zealand is presently negotiating a free trade agreement with India. We're looking at that with excitement.
Wow.
Because if you look at the demographics of India, of the young population coming up, it's very exciting that they are looking to more Western dining habits, of which wine is a part. So there is so much opportunity. So we will continue to protect and grow. North America will remain a key growth driver for our wine industry, but we're increasingly going to be looking at the Asia region, and it's on our back doorstep. So it makes a lot of sense to really take a lead role in producing refreshing wines for those markets where it goes so well.
Oh yeah, certainly. My wife is Taiwanese, and we eat a lot of just Taiwanese or Chinese food, and I think those wines definitely pair well with it. And we were in Thailand just last year, and I was actually seeing a fair bit of New Zealand wines next to some Australian wines. So I'm excited to.
I lived in Thailand for 4 years and really developed my palate for their spicy cuisine, and especially the aromatic wines with a little residual sugar go super well, whether it be Riesling, Gewürztraminer even, with a Thai green curry. Wow, that's a match in heaven for me.
Oh yeah, certainly. Not only a pairing for the food, but also the humidity. So you have a double whammy. Well, we talked a little bit about trends in different markets. What are you seeing in terms of trends among different ages of wine drinkers? Maybe trends in like millennials and some of the younger folks just getting into drinking, in Gen Z and the Zoomers.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and something that we ask ourselves a lot here at New Zealand Winegrowers. I think post the pandemic, we really saw an acceleration of change, maybe a solidifying of things that maybe have been happening slowly in the background, and it just accelerated it. But it was a health pandemic, so this moderation and mindful drinking trend has definitely emerged. Gen Z in particular, drinking less alcohol. There's lots of podcasts out there similar to what we're talking about now on this topic, and there's conjecture that it's not that they don't want it, it's just that they're broke. They're earning less than we probably did. But there's also just general curiosity, the sober curious movement about how can I have the experience, but maybe not without the alcohol. And I do think that with the advent of the Apple Watch, we are measuring things more now. That adage that if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. I think people are perhaps being just more thoughtful about sleep and calorie intake and their fitness and all that sort of thing. Wine and its natural place around a table with company and good food and connectedness, that's all part of a balanced lifestyle. So I think for people seeking balance, wine very much has a role to play in that, but we've got to do a really good job of showing how it's part of a holistic lifestyle. And I do think that with younger consumers seeking all their information in a digital environment, where we used to tell our stories about our wines in our regions, printed wine magazines, for example, that might not be how people consume information anymore. So I think you've got to fish where the fish are, and the eyeballs are online. So being digitally native alongside your consumers is really important to continue with our stories. And this sort of ethical consumerism, people making purchase decisions based on their values. So telling our stories of how we make our product, the authentic stories, whether it be a more artisan wine or whether it be a wine made in a larger winemaking facility. If you're transparent and true with your stories, I think that's really important for these generations. And also, I think perhaps there's just this casualization happening. Maybe it's just as occasions are shifting. Whilst I think wine has a natural place at the table, table dining situations are probably becoming less and less as rents become more expensive and we're having an increase in one-person households. So it's how do you remove this sort of, wine has to be part of a meal? Does it? Can't it just be as you're taking a train journey from city A to city B that it can't be a can of a refreshing wine as you do some work or talk to a friend, for example? So I think we need to evolve with occasions and perhaps take the stuffiness that some may perceive the wine sector has, take that out.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you so much for your time here. If anybody wants to go learn more about New Zealand wines, what are some resources that you would recommend or websites?
Yeah, we have a great part of our website dedicated to people who want to learn about New Zealand wine. I can give it to you for your show notes, but we have a trade hub. We actually have a little New Zealand wine course that you can take yourself through. It's just a series of slides and this little exam at the end, and we'll send you a certificate if you so wish to show your completion of it. But on our website, we have information about all our regions. We've got some incredible drone video footage as part of that series of updates on the regions. Maybe that can whet your appetite to see our gorgeous landscapes to make you want to come here to New Zealand. We're very active on social media. We have Instagram, Facebook with regular updates. So yeah, I'd say follow New Zealand Wine on social media. Our industry magazine is an online version. We can share that for your show notes as well. But we pride ourselves at New Zealand Winegrowers as being an authoritative source of information for New Zealand wine. Our annual report is such a rich source of information. It's available online. I can give you that link. But our sustainability report that was just launched to mark 30 years and our roadmap to net carbon zero, what we're aiming to achieve, it's really forward-thinking stuff. And I encourage anyone with interest in the New Zealand wine industry to see what hard work we're doing.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Charlie. I think that's the perfect place to leave it today. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much, Billy.
All right. That was our interview with Charlotte Reed, General Manager at New Zealand Winegrowers. I hope everybody learned a little bit more about New Zealand wines. Definitely go seek out the ones that you can find in your stores. Check out the Pinot Noirs, some of my favorite in the world. Obviously, many of us are familiar with the Sauvignon Blancs, but I encourage you to seek out some of those more reserved bottlings and definitely check out the other varieties that are grown from New Zealand too. If you see something you don't recognize, try it out. It's probably going to be very interesting and probably very good. But for now, that is our episode for this week. We'll be back with the 5 questions on Friday and another full episode next week. Cheers.